that the Rebbe gave, addressed all the Jewish people. So I'm going to send it to the chat. I'm just going to paraphrase from the Hebrew before we continue on with the Farbrengen. Baruch Hashem, so that is from 1983, during the time of Mei HaGvola, the days that we were preparing to receive the Torah at Mount Sinai, Brooklyn, New York, to the sons and daughters of Israel, wherever they are. God bless you all. Greetings and blessings. In these special treasure days, certainly every single man and woman will use these days to add in their preparation to receive the Torah, to prepare with greater strength and greater power for this great day, the day that we stood before Hashem in Mount Sinai, to receive the Torah, the eternal Torah that will never be changed. Go out and learn how our forefathers prepared for this day, starting from the very first day that they heard the news from Moshe Rabbeinu, that when you leave Egypt, you'll serve Hashem on this mountain. It means that receiving the Torah, the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai was the whole purpose of their departure from Egypt, going from slavery to freedom, to become servants of Hashem, not servants of servants. So, including not to be servants to the strange God which is in your midst, not to be servants to the Yetzer Hara, which is only this is the complete and true freedom. So everything is go and look and think about how our forefathers prepared for this day from the moment they heard Moshe Rabbeinu say that we're going to leave Egypt, we're going to become servants of Hashem on Sinai, and not servants of servants, including not to be servants of our own Yetzer Hara, which is that's the only true and complete freedom. It's understood that all the miracles and all the wonders that they saw in Egypt, they saw by the sea, which were in a way of the Jewish people the Egyptians experiencing pain and suffering, the Jewish people experiencing salvation. These miracles that they saw with their eyes, they bewildered, they totally astonished the Jewish people, and they brought their hearts and minds to be close to their Father in heaven with love and reverence. Like water, when you look in water, you see a reflection of your face. So too, by seeing that the amazing miracles that God did for us when we were in Egypt, that brought us to that caused a reflection in our hearts to feel love for Hashem. As the Alter Rebbe writes about the subject in his Sefer Tani Kadisha, the famous parable of the great king. And we learned this parable before. The king, Alter Rebbe says that every person, if someone shows you love, you feel love back to that person. If the person is in the same social status as you, if they have the same social status, they show you love, you'll love them back. Imagine Alter Rebbe says, the great king comes to a person who is lying in a dung heap. He comes there with all of his ministers, and he takes the guy from the heap and he brings him into his palace and goes from one room to another room until he gets to his very own chamber, and there he hugs and kisses this guy. You can imagine Alter Rebbe says, even if this guy has a heart of stone, he will melt with love for the king. So the Alter Rebbe said that's what Hashem did for us. We were in Egypt, we were in the dung heap, and Hashem took us out of there and brought us to Mount Torah, and he gave us, and he hugged us and kissed us by giving us the Torah mitzvahs. So can you imagine, Rebbe says, the way the Jewish people felt, seeing all these miracles that God did, that he saved us and he punished them, and exactly the way this king took this guy out of the dung heap. And right after leaving Egypt with an upright, with pride, Yad Rama, they started counting the days and weeks with yearning and thirst for that special treasure day, the day that God descended on Mount Sinai in front of their eyes and gave them his precious gift. And they were ascending day by day in preparation for this event. And this was all with the encouragement and the assistance of Moshe Rabbeinu, the shepherd of the Jewish people, the faithful shepherd from that day until this very day. So, and in between, God continued to astonish them with his kindness by feeding them bread from heaven and bringing water out of a rock, the rock of Miriam. and giving them the clouds of glory and leading them in the desert, far away from all the vanities of the world. After all these preparations and more, that wasn't enough. When they got to these 3 days before giving the Torah, they need an additional preparation in these 3 days to ascend to even higher level in order to receive the Torah of Hashem with joy and inner inspiration. And this is understood. How much more so? How there has to be an effort to prepare to receive the Torah in our generation, because this is the very same Torah that was given at Mount Sinai. But so that's how things should be. Now there continues and says why this could be. But since our Torah, the Torah of truth, says that God does not come to ask us things unless it's something which is in the capability of the human being. He doesn't ask us to do things which are beyond our capabilities. Bevada, that puts Bevada in both. For sure, God has given every single man and woman all of the necessary strengths and all that they need, so that when these days come, the days of the 3 days before the giving of the Torah and the time of giving the Torah come, that every Jew should fulfill all this perfectly, as is the will of the giver of the Torah. And all a person has to do is to use those strength and all the things that they need. They have to bring them out from the potential to the actual. And God, it says in the Torah, Hashem gives strength to his people, and it means in the simple sense. In other words, God gives us power. And our commentaries explain also that strength means Torah. That means that even before the giving the Torah, Hashem gives us the power and the strength to receive the Torah and to fulfill the Torah and perfectly. These 3 days of preparation for the giving of the Torah and the time of the giving of the Torah itself come once a year. But there is a little bit of this and the preparation of this, and there's a miniature giving of the Torah every day. As it's known, the explanation of the bracha, conclusion of bracha that we say when we bracha on Torah, we say every morning in our morning blessings, blessed are you God, and also when we get an aliyah, we say, blessed are you God who gives the Torah. We say it in the present tense, because every single day that Hashem gives us Torah anew. It's understood, therefore, there has to be preparation for receiving the Torah every day anew. And our sages have said and commanded us that every single day the Torah has to be in your eyes like it's new, or another text reads, new mamash, actually new. The Torah has to be brand new to you. This is similar to the holiday of Pesach, the day that God took us out of Egypt, the time of our freedom, that once a year there is an annual remembrance of the freedom from Egypt in the beginning of Pesach, and then there is the obligation to remember leaving Egypt every single day, twice a day, and at night as well. And the annual remembrance, when the Torah says to remember something, it means that it actually doesn't, not just remember, it means it actually is being renewed and revealed again. So that annual renewal and remembrance of Pesach adds vitality and life in our and light in our remembrance every single day. So too is this regarding the giving of the Torah and the receiving the Torah in these 3 days of preparation, the annual giving of the Torah once a year in this 3rd month. And from these days, God gives us tremendous abundance and light and life to be able to fulfill these words. The Torah should be in our eyes like it's, as if it's new and literally new every single day throughout the entire day. So in order, basically once a year we have the giving of the Torah, but that is like the celebration of Pesach. It's not just once a year. Pesach is meant to inspire the remembrance every single day. Every single day is supposed to remember leaving Egypt. So too the giving of the Torah on Shavuos, it's not just supposed to be once a year, but that annual day that we receive the Torah anew is supposed to inspire every single day that we have this this powerful feeling that the Torah is given to us anew and prepare for it and so therefore there's a concept of preparing to receive the Torah every day. May it be Hashem's will that every single man and woman should complete all the preparations, especially in these 3 days before the giving of the Torah, until we have 7 complete weeks and receive the Torah with joy and inspiration, the time of giving the Torah. And as mentioned above, in order that this should impact and continue every single day of all days of the year. And as I said before, throughout the day, to feel the gift of giving the Torah. That's the end of this letter.
Simple question.
Yeah.
3 days. So I know Shavuos is 2 days.
Right.
Is it always overlap on the Shabbos or?
No, the 3 days means 3 days before the Torah was given.
Oh, okay.
The 3 days before the Torah was given, Moshe Rabbeinu told the Jewish people special things they had to do to prepare to receive the Torah.
Okay.
So those things are once a year, and even though every day we're supposed to remember receiving the Torah, but these three days before, and the days of the giving the Torah itself, are meant to empower the whole year. Okay, now let's continue on in the Farbrengen. We're up to Eis Yud on page Chaf Gimel. It's known the teaching, the Alter Rebbe and the Pasuk, draw me after you, and we will run. Says the Alter Rebbe. Mashcheni, draw me after you, refers to the departure, the freedom from Egypt. Mashcheni, it's the same. Acharecha norutza, ha'mesiras nefesh, gezamsher, pausing in the roots. We will run after you. That's referring to the mesiras nefesh of Kriyas Yamsuf. Haviyani Yamel Chadara, the king has brought me into his chamber. That's the Gimel Antera, on page Chav Gimel. Emil Beis Yud. King has brought me into his chamber. That's the giving of the Torah. Shabazation, Ribi, Madregas, Amasa, Hadum, Pshutim, the Gilmas Chabach, There are many levels in being in the king's chamber. The king has brought me in his chamber. There are many levels within that, and what that means. But what did the simple Jews do? The verse continues, let us rejoice, let us be happy in you. The word in you, Chav B'cha, is equal to 22. So the simple Jews, on the day of the giving of the Torah, what are they rejoicing in? They're rejoicing in you and in the letters of the Torah. The British Pashto, what this means is, simple meaning. We're talking about the letters of the Torah, that's something which is relevant to everybody, even to simple people. But if you think about this more deeply, it's specifically in our joy, in the letters of the Torah, that we have the true acceptance of the Torah. Okay, so just to recap what we just said in this section. Draw me after you is how we left Egypt. We will run refers to our running into the Yamsuf with mesiras nefesh. The king has brought me into his chamber, that refers to Shavuos. And in the chamber it says, we will rejoice in you. What does you mean? You means the letters of the Aleph base. And it's specifically in the letters of the Aleph base that we have the true real acceptance of the Torah. What does that mean? What this means is, what does it mean? Draw me after you. That God draws and pulls a Jew out. Not that he goes out himself, but that God pulls me out. That's how we left Egypt. The Jewish people themselves couldn't leave. Even one slave wasn't able to leave. Therefore, they needed God to pull them out of Egypt because they didn't want to leave. They weren't able to leave by themselves. Next page. But once God took us out of Egypt, once He drew us after Him, then God demanded they should do something themselves. This was mainly accomplished after 6 days subsequent to their departure from Egypt. This was achieved. They did something on their own when they came to the splitting of the sea. Why? How was Kriyas Yamsuf accomplished? How did the sea split? It is through Nachshon Aminadav, who jumped into the sea. So he had actual mesiras nefesh. But Oz, okay, so Zeb's thinking that's Nachshon Aminadav. That's not everybody. Why are we saying that's when all the Jewish people achieve mesiras nefesh? But Oz is Chila, Gam mesiras nefesh, Apel, Shekol Bnei Yisrael, Shalach Midbar. And then the Navi continues and says, let's mark the Yisrael. Here, so want to say it? No? They want to listen. Okay, no problem. I do a lot of Karbonos entertainment. Yes. All right. After we left Egypt, we crossed the sea. Then the Torah says, We all had sacrifice. Now Hashem sacrificed when we crossed the sea. But then what happened next? We all went in the desert. What does it say about the desert? Hashem says, walk after me in the desert, in the land where there's nothing growing. To walk after God in the desert, that took Mesiras Nefesh on our part, because there's no way to survive it. After, while we were still in Egypt, once the slavery stopped Rosh Hashanah. We had everything we wanted. Egypt was a land that the Gashmias had lots of blessings. Nevertheless, what did we do? After the sea was split and the Jews were on the other, they were free. We left Egypt without any provisions. It tells us the greatness of the Jewish people. They didn't say how we can go out in the desert without any food. They believed in Moshe Rabbeinu, they believed in Hashem, and they went out into the desert. As the pasuk says, Hashem says, I remember your love for me as a bride. That's referring to us when we left Egypt. He went out into the desert after me without any preparation. Their decision to leave Egypt and go out in the desert was one thing. But the actual sacrifice to actually go out in the desert was after Kriyas Samson. That's when they actually were in the desert. They couldn't find water over there. That was something more. When Moshe told Pare, we're going to leave Egypt for 3 days, okay, so that wasn't officially, that didn't require Mesiras Nefesh to go for 3 days out in the desert. The Mesiras Nefesh was, Egypt is done, and we're leaving, and we're going out in the desert, and we're not coming back. That was when the real sacrifice on our part was there. And that's what the pasuk means when it says, and draw me after you, and we will run. Draw me after you is referring to our departure from Egypt. That was God took us out of Egypt. We will run. The word running means that there's friction with something, if you're escaping from something. What are we running away from? We're running away from logic. We're not in a state of tranquility and calm. We're going against our minds. We're going against how we feel. We're just running after Hashem. Logically, there's no room for the behavior of the Jewish people. There's 600,000 people. About 3 million people altogether, besides women and children. They're out in the desert, land without anything growing. This was total sacrifice. It wasn't just they gave their desire over to Hashem. Siddur says that Mesiras Nefesh also means to devote your feelings and desire to what Hashem wants you to do. This wasn't just devoting their desire. Just they gave their whole being, even their bodies, to the will of Hashem. So that's the second part of this verse of Song of Songs. We will run. We will run refers to our crossing the sea, going out in the desert, following Hashem blindly or with faith. And only that way were we able to receive the Torah. Only then could God bring us, as the next verse says, the king has brought me into his chamber. To get into the king's chamber, it requires first to leave Egypt and go out in the desert with this total devotional sacrifice. Why? How come we needed this sacrifice to get the Torah? The Torah is a wisdom and will of God. It's beyond the parameters of human logic. It's not like all other wisdoms. Make an effort, you can understand all other wisdoms. It says in the Talmud, if someone says, I tried and I was successful, believe them. All the wisdom, you try hard, you can figure it out. But for Torah, before studying Torah, we do something else. We say a blessing. We say that God has chosen us from all nations. In order for God to give us His Torah, for us to receive it, in order to get it right, to really be attuned to the real meaning of Torah, the one who's studying has to want to get to the truth. He has to want to connect the giver of the Torah, to become one with Hashem. That's the reason why a non-Jew who studies Torah deserves a death penalty. Why? Why is it we so hard? Even said Gezel said Gilarais, Marsha Murasa. Says the Torah that Moshe Rabbeinu commanded us is an inheritance for the Jewish people. The word inheritance also means engaged. Hashem gave us a Torah as part of our engagement with Him. So if a non-Jew studies Torah, so he's committing, he's entering a relationship which he's getting between the bride and the groom. This is something that God gave us. So if he learns Torah, he gets a death penalty because he is committing immorality. He is taking something which belongs to the bride, or he's stealing from the Jewish people because it's the word merasha also means inheritance. You can only study Torah once. It's only possible. Study Torah is only possible once God chose us and gave us His Torah. It's impossible that in the Torah you could, that we're studying, we're human beings, limited people. It's impossible that we'll be able to connect with the wisdom and the will of Hashem, which is infinite. The only reason why when we study Torah, we are able to connect with God's wisdom and God's will is because God gave it and put it in the Torah in a miraculous way. So what the general point we're saying is that in order to receive the Torah, a Jew has to be different than the rest of the world. It means a Jew has to ascend beyond limitations of the world. A type of chafei. In order for a Jew to receive the Torah, he has to be different than the rest of the world. He has to ascend and go beyond limitations of the world. The closing sign, that's the whole meaning of leaving Egypt. Leaving Egypt means leaving all limitations. To get the Torah, you have to leave all limitations and boundaries. Therefore, a non-Jew who is still within the confines of the limitations of the world, he can't get the Torah, which is beyond the world. The Torah is the wisdom of Hashem. It's beyond the world. So a non-Jew studying Torah is impossible. He's still in limitations of the world. How is he going to absorb something which is beyond the world? By him studying Torah, he's going against the rules of creation and he's causing damage. Yeah.
You're saying that, you said that non-Jew studies Torah is stealing.
Yeah.
That's what you really mean. Because that means you can't have any comments. That can't be. Or does it mean more that if a Jew lets a non-steal away from him the ability to study Torah, then he is stealing his inheritance away from him?
We're all converts.
Well, I guess that's true.
So if non-Jew converts to Judaism, he's just like us.
Well, I understand that.
There are some parts of Torah which are relevant to non-Jews also. For example, and as the mitzvah to learn those parts. But the other parts which aren't relevant to them, so they're getting between the bride and the groom. It's not, in other words, it's not just information. Hashem put in the Torah His essence and His some other worldly. So what is this non-Jew doing? He is still within the limitations of the world. Sure. He's not able to connect to this infinity in the Torah. Right. So he's like breaking the rules of creation. He's trying to engage with something which doesn't fit.
Which is it's a hard divine destiny to be able to absorb. But this is probably the basis for anti-Semitism and so on. But are we supposed to hate everybody in the world?
What is it hate?
Well, I'm saying because they're distracting us with cartoons and Maseratis and drugs.
Jews don't sell Maseratis.
Wow. I'm just saying, the Gashis. That's what I was trying to say. It's a cartoon of.
We're not supposed to hate everybody. We're supposed to focus on our mission in the world, but hatred isn't part of it. Okay, so the Alter Rebbe said there's another verse that the Alter Rebbe gave a teaching which is relevant to Shavuos, says go out and see. The Alter Rebbe says in order to see, you have to go out. In order to see godliness, to go out of yourself. Mm-hmm. So it's not enough that Hashem draws us out of Egypt in the way of He just draws us out like there's a arousal from above, and Hashem takes us out of Egypt, but that's not being ready. We have to, the next part of the verse is very relevant. We have to do this. Next part of the verse is, after you, we will run. We have to have this Mesiras Nefesh beyond logic. As the Jews did then, they ran after Hashem in the desert. And only when you have the Mesiras Nefesh, you have to sacrifice to go after Hashem, then the Torah is able to permeate you internally, your godly soul, your animal soul, and your body, and lift you up above the world. So that's the meaning of the verse. The king has brought me into his chambers. I translated it correctly. That is brought us into his chamber. The king has brought me into his chambers. What does that mean? The Torah has a relationship to the mind of a person. So why does it say that the king has brought me into his chambers in the plural? Because in order to receive, the answer is, the reason why it says chambers in the plural, because in order to get the Torah, it's not enough your mind. The Torah has to permeate your whole being till your heels. Only the Torah permeates your heels too. Can you see the Torah is not just a logical thing? That's something which is beyond limitations. If it's just touching your mind, it means you're not getting Torah, because Torah isn't just a logical thing. So and therefore has to permeate the whole person. That's why we said earlier, what's the real sign you accepted the Torah? The verse continues, we will rejoice, we will be happy in you. In you, we said before, the letters of the Torah are numerically equivalent to the word in you. The 22 letters of the alphabet. Simple people that just say the words of Torah. What's the sign that God gave the Torah to Jewish people? How do you see that? When the Torah permeates the heels of the Jewish people. Simple people, which are called the heels, which they can't understand the Torah, if their joy in the Torah, through the letters of the Torah, the inanimate part of the Torah has different parts. The inanimate part of the Torah are the letters of the Torah. So when the heels of the Jewish people are studying the inanimate part of the Torah, then you could see there's something otherworldly over it. It's not just a logical thing. So according to what we've spoken many times ever since, that everything that exists by Jewish people as a whole and in Torah as a whole exists also in the life of every Jew as an individual, so too does this verse exist in us individually. This verse, draw me after you when we will run. In addition to the whole time of receiving the Torah, there is a concept of drawing me after you. Hashem draws us after. Hashem draws after him. We go from the weekdays to Yom Tov. So that's when we go from weekdays to Yom Tov, that's Hashem drawing us after him. Hashem is bringing us to a new environment, to a new place. So besides that, Hashem drawing us after him, we also have to run with our feet physically. And how do we run with our feet physically? There says this is by going on talucha, to go to faraway places, to bring joy to Jews and other shuls, and the joy of Yom Tov, the joy of receiving the Torah. And there says all those who have done this and come back to Shavuos Farbrengen, they should say l'chaim, and say l'chaim with joy and inner inspiration. And through this, bring simcha to those people they visited already, among all the Jewish people, and open for their good for the entire year. L'chaim, l'chaim.
Questions, lots of questions.
No?
First one, doesn't seem like it's the Yom Tov that the Sarah's it's either after the Yom Tov or just before the Yom Tov, but the Yom Tov itself is a nafesh. It's an isolated thing. So our Mesiras Nefesh happened after the Yom Tov.
Correct.
Why is it the Yom Tov itself is the Torah states is the Mesiras Nefesh? Number two is, what Paul said, all the Torah that we speak to the non-Jews, especially if it's Siddur, you're having a conversation with someone, you throw some Siddur in there, it's like, I feel like now I'm damaging the
No. Okay. The Rebbe said the translated Torah.
And with an inheritance, if it's present to you and it's yours, can't you now give it to somebody else? So if I'm giving over that Torah, I'm deciding a piece of my inheritance to share with somebody else. Why should it be them stealing or them damaging? If it's mine and it's my inheritance, can't I do what I want with it?
So answers very briefly. Question number one, the Rebbe actually says that the Anachnu Adam really started. The real Mesiras Nefesh, all the Jewish people, was afterwards. Question number two, whatever we can share with non-Jews, it's a mitzvah to share with non-Jews. And Chassidus, especially matters of faith in God, as Rebbe instructed to translate Shayach L'Emunah into all languages, including Chinese. So it's definitely relevant to everybody. Okay.